Hey, how's it going, everybody? Thanks for joining myself, Forrest Steffen, CG Supervisor, and Sean Tracy, Tech Director, Tech Content Director,
Tech Content Director.
All things technical.
Yes.
So he's gonna help me answer some questions, because
Awesome.
we've got some great questions this week. I'd like to thank the subscribers for making this show possible, because without you all, there'd be nothing for us to work on.
No,
So,
and we wouldn't
awesome.
have this awesome platform to speak
Absolutely.
and explain all the stuff that we're doing behind the scenes to give them the best damn space sim ever.
And to give progress on where we're at, because
Right.
there's so many things and so many moving parts happening at all the time.
Right.
All right,
That's
well,
so true.
I'm going to go ahead and get started. Our first question is, Daz, given that procedural planets, awesome topic. Given that procedural planets are generated from a seed, if we go down to a planet and mine a location and it becomes depleted, what happens after we leave? And this is a two-parter. Is the planet permanently altered, or would that location regenerate, creating an area that we can constantly go back to and exploit?
Well, it's an awesome question. And first things first, just wanted to explain, because I tend to end up answering a lot of questions related to the procedural planet stuff, but the big brains that are really working on the procedural planet technology are all within Frankfurt. So guys like Marco Corbetta, Carsten Wenzel, Sasha Hoba, Pascal Mueller, they're all working pretty much full-time on the procedural planets now. We get a lot of oversight on them. We've got to blend them into the game where they're working on the tech. So just consider that when I answer any questions regarding it, is that, I'm trying to represent as best as I can.
We just get to play with it, right? But they're driving all the tech.
That's right. They're driving everything that goes through. So to get to the actual question, it's a really good question, because yes, the planets are generated from a seed, but consider that our game is multiplayer. We can't generate a different seed for every single player that goes down to the planet. So me and Forrest can't be flying towards a planet. He sees a mountain, I don't see a mountain, I end up flying through it or whatever. So that's got to already be kind of set in stone. So when we generate this planet originally as a developer, yes, we will have a seed. But once you see it as a player, you're always going to see the same thing. Now, when it comes down to actually permanently altering the surface of it, what's likely to happen is that when we do mining, it's going to be another object on top of the planet.
Right.
It's not going to be the planet itself. So no, you probably won't alter the actual planet geometry itself or any of the seeds related to it, but you'll alter a different object that's actually placed on top of the planet. So just to give a really out there example, you've got a big block of ice, right? That big block of ice is sitting there on the planet. You fly down, you're mining water out of the ice, let's say. That ice disappears. Now the question is, will that ice then regenerate? Well, it's a design question. It's really going to be up to the designers. There's no technical reason why it can't, but likely what's going to be happening is that we've got an area of ice, right? There's going to be a certain number of minerals within a certain, pretty large area. And you're not going to get the exact same ice block in the exact same position.
I think that's where the seed kicks in, right? So it's not, you get that initial planet generated, but then the objects on the planet that you're mining and stuff, maybe those have, multiple seeds. So when it regenerates itself, if it regenerates itself, which I don't see why not, that would be kind of
And that's something that we want to control, because it's really important that we control the commodities within our world.
So that the economics of the whole thing.
Yeah, exactly. So, it's kind of a long answer to whether it regenerates or not. I would say no, it doesn't actually regenerate, but it will be somewhere else. But the seeds are all shared, so everybody will see the same thing.
Exactly. Awesome. All right, Tranton asks, are there any new animations or physics effects that you have been working on, and the challenges that you have encountered? There's so much.
Right, there's so much to do with animations and physics together. It's a system that is completely interwoven. Ivo Herzeg does a lot of work on this particular system, as well as a gentleman by the name of Chris Rains. So what we've been working on constantly is the zero-G driven ragdoll kind of technology. This is pretty unique to our game, and the driven ragdoll itself isn't unique, but the transition between like an animated character to driven ragdoll back and forth and going within physics things like this, there's a lot of problems and a lot of challenges that brings. It might not be super obvious to the players that we are working on things within there, because from what they see, oh yeah, it all works. But there's little things that we want to fix within that. So the other sort of portion of this that's been very tricky actually to be working on is the skeleton extension portion of this. So has a little bit to do with the new item port system. But what happens with the new item port system is that you start as a base skeleton and then you add on, let's say, a head or a helmet, and that skeleton actually extends. So we have a skeleton within the head that has a shared root, and then that actually extends into as the base skeleton. And then we just deal with it as a normal character. So what's tricky about that is that we've got to figure out a way, and we've worked on it quite a bit last week before Evo went on holidays, to rebuild that physics skeleton without completely rebuilding it.
Right.
Because it's one of the things that takes the longest time on the CPU, and then thus to be synchronized to all the players.
Right.
So yeah, that's kind of what we're working on within there. We want that driven ragdoll to be affected. We want, as we add different skeleton extensions on, to extend the skeleton physically as well.
There's just so much to think about. I mean, you know, you're in
Absolutely.
one physics environment, then when you enter a ship, you enter another physics environment, right? Then what happens if you're ragdolling from one physics environment into the next physics environment, and then heading between back into your regular animation, right? So
Exactly.
there's just so much to think about.
And the relative
right?
space of that moves so often. Like we have a world space, then we have the local grid space, then we have a zone space. So yeah, there's a lot of transitioning between different, we call them partitioning grids.
Right. It's just so cool, though.
Yep.
All right. Next question. The Orion mining ship has a large laser for dissecting asteroids into
More mining.
smaller chunks. Mining's just super cool.
Dissecting asteroids, that's a good way to put it.
Dissect, because you're like getting
Dissecting here.
getting inside. How do you implement a continuous beam weapon like that? Is it mostly animation while using a ultra high rate of fire and ultra low DPS, or is it an actual beam?
This is actually a really, really good question, and this comes up a lot in games actually, when you're going to have something like a pulsed laser that's really just a glorified machine gun,
Right.
Or if you have a beam laser weapon.
Right.
And as everybody knows, we don't really have a beam weapon within Star Citizen yet. We solved this problem on an earlier project that I had worked on, a little modding project called MechWarrior Living Legends. We had they weren't continuous beams, but they were there for quite some time. So the problems you've got to solve is not necessarily having a long beam, because we have different levels of ray casting that we can do.
But continuous segments where you know where to
Exactly.
break the beam, so you know where it stops when a ray
That's
casting
right,
hits its
because
location.
we've got to show it somehow, right?
Right.
We've got to be able to author the geometry so it looks good. And then second, we've got to be able to change the length
Right.
of that geometry. Now, does it make sense to have one piece of geometry
that just draws until
that's
it hits
2
a
kilometers
distance?
long? Well, think of the bounding box of something like this,
Right.
right? So that's going to cull out as soon as you look away and things
Yeah.
like that. So that doesn't really work out well. So what we did on the MechWarrior project was we actually had little segments
That
of
keep,
lasers
just
that
kept
would
stacking
be
on top throughout, and then
stacked on
leaving,
top.
and then
But
stop.
then you've got other problems with that that comes to do with draw calls. So you've got one object, 2 draw calls. Another
What happens
object,
if they're
2
all
draw
1
calls,
meter?
2 objects, another draw
And it
call.
goes
And if you've got 2,000
kilometers
meters of
or
that,
something, yeah, what happens?
Exactly. So the best way to do something like this is not necessarily to have like a really continuous rate of fire, is to do that ray cast. You do that ray check every couple every couple milliseconds anyways. Not every frame, because there's no reason really to do it every frame. But to actually extend those verts, you control the verts on the effect itself so that it does the exact same length of that ray. And then you grab those few verts and you move it back, move it forward, move
Which
it
is
back.
kind
move
of
it
already how our projectile system works currently. For those that don't know, in the original trailer, I made a bunch of particle effects, and then I gave them damage and physics and all that stuff. But once we actually came out with Arena Commander and needed a more sophisticated solution to support, networking and all this stuff, right? We actually decided to switch from just a particle effect over to a cylinder, a capsule.
Right.
And then that capsule would draw and shrink depending on, its velocity and all these effects. And then we would attach a particle effect on top of that, including with an additional glow shader. So we rendered the capsule as this type of glow, which we have all these shader effects on it. And then we could also attach a particle effect on top of that for additional effects, and then the verts actually can move and stuff. So that's going to be a super fun
It's going to be a neat
create.
effect,
I'm
yeah.
really looking forward
and
to
actually,
that.
what's really cool is that we've already got all the actual weapon fire, the weapon type. We've got that all in place, all the code in place. It's just really a matter of having the visuals that come alongside it. There'll be cool things like when we have scrap when you're trying to actually pull out, minerals and things like that from a ship.
Right.
When you're trying to get, we're calling it scrap, I think, or
Yeah.
something like this. But we're going to need a beam weapon for that. We're going to
Yep.
need some sort of beam for repair. We're going to need some sort of beam for mining. So we need these beams anyways. And again, the game code is pretty much done for that. We just need a nice effect. So that's kind of next step for some of the VFX guys.
All right. Yeah. So that's going to be. I'm looking forward to seeing what the team comes up with that one, because we're getting close, I think.
Yeah, definitely.
Will planets? That was a good one. Will planets have variant biomes and/or weather regions, or will each planet be uniform? Do you think current procedural tech will be capable of generating flora, which is like plants, right? And fauna, which is animals, living things, at a fidelity close enough to art you are producing?
That's a great question. So there's actually
That's a
two
fun
questions within here,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So the first one that I want to deal with is, will planets have variant biomes? Of course, we have to. I mean, otherwise you're going to end up with planets that all look rocky,
Yeah.
planets that all look frozen, planets that all look, and we've got some of the best atmosphere technology that I've ever seen.
Oh, it's incredible.
It's absolutely phenomenal.
Yeah.
We've got, I don't know how much we're talking about this yet, but we've solved all kinds of lighting challenges, let's say, so things like GI on the planets. There's some good solutions already in place. So I don't see any reason why we wouldn't have variant biomes. Now, if he's talking about variant biomes within the planet itself, so you've got a planet, up north is going to be the polar ice caps.
And down
on the south is going to be polar ice caps, but in the middle, does it get
Desert
warmer
or
and stuff
something,
like
who
this?
knows, yeah.
Absolutely, there's no reason why we can't do this. Weather regions is a bit of a different story. That's a lot harder because, sure, we can do all levels of code. We know where you are on the planet. We know what sector you're in, what's around you, but how do we communicate that over to the player?
And how deep do you go with the design? Do you have it where when you go to that location, it's always raining, or do you do it
Exactly,
where
or
there's
is there
actually
a
some kind of
hurricane?
weather happen? I mean, so I think there's a lot of things to solve with the
But
the
to
weather.
give you guys an idea, these are the things we're thinking about. So the fidelity of our planets are going to be such that you've not seen this before.
Right.
There's no question.
Absolutely. And I've seen
now,
it. It's
whether you
awesome.
have moving weather and things like that on it, it's a problem that we're not yet ready to solve, and they're already taking a look at it. So things like volumetric clouds and all this kind of stuff. But to have moving weather patterns and things like that within the planets, that'll be something for another time, I think. But I do think that that's going to be one of the pieces we want to do. I think it'd be amazing. So the second piece of this question is, do I think that the current procedural tech will be capable of generating the flora and fauna at the fidelity that we are? Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
that's the
because
goal.
the art is still making the asset, so the fidelity will be there, right? It's just a matter of this procedural tech deciding where to populate the plants and the animals, right? But I don't see any reason that we can't have the same visual fidelity that we have for the rest of the game.
And that's the drive, that's the direction, right? And all of us had worked on, we've all worked on, little levels that have been hand authored so much. And our goal with this whole system is to be able to make an entire world at that same level of fidelity, right? We want to have, trees that look like Crisis. We want to have, animals and things like that within them. Absolutely, we want them to be at that exact same fidelity. And do I think it's possible? Absolutely.
I think so too.
With most of the stuff that we've seen in the last little while, absolutely.
You just have to be smart about how you author your art, and as long as you go for a very technical, practical approach and optimized approach, I think it's really quite
No, and that's it. And to be honest too, the other thing with it is that generating forests, trees, even animals and things like that, and getting them all placed on the planet is difficult, yes, but there's harder types of planets to do.
Yeah.
One of the more difficult, and you've worked on things around this, is like a procedural city type planet. So what then do we do, and how do we keep that fidelity for a planet that's covered in an entire city? That's a lot trickier, I think, anyways.
Yeah. Well, it's just a matter, you just make everything as modular as possible, and then you could, who knows what you can do, right?
Exactly.
With the right gameplay code.
So I hope that answered the question. I know we're being a bit obtuse, but it's only because
we haven't gone
want
to
to be
a lot
able
of
to
these
show
things
you.
yet. Yeah. And they're
before we
all,
get too far.
they're happening. It's all a moving product. All right, now we're going to get to a more difficult question. and a long one, so stay with me. With localized physics grids being in the game, have you considered using them for more unorthodox means? Oh, that's cool. For example, spaceships or stations with varying directions of gravity. All of a sudden, I think of Space Odyssey, you know, when you're like the camera
Yeah,
up
exactly.
like that.
Yeah.
I'd be thinking of something like circular space stations or space stations where the ground just continues up a wall, Inception style, or spaceships where one deck and the direction of gravity would point outwards, so the hull would act as the floor. How cool would it be to look up and see people hanging from the ceiling doing their normal business? Speaking of circular gravity, are planets going to be basically enormous localized physics grids, or is there more to them? If so, can you explain a bit about how they are going to work in that regard?
All right, so these guys are always sneaking 2 questions in, aren't they? There's always
They
like
are.
there's like a main one. Oh, but by the way,
20 for the
procedural
developers.
planet something, right?
Well, it's
No,
such
and
a cool
that's
question.
I'm
You can see
so-
why it spawns more questions.
Yeah, I'm
because-
super happy that everybody's so into the planets, because that's going to be such a huge, unique point to Star Citizen, anyways. So the first question really is about localized physics grids and using them in a more unorthodox way. We've done this internally a lot, actually.
Yep.
You can have a lot of fun with the physics grid. Doing a circular space station is very much possible. So that way you can have a localized direction of gravity all throughout the localized physics grid, which is quite cool. The other thing, again, this is something that Chris Rain had worked a lot on, is that we've got a sparse voxel representation of the physics grid, meaning we can shape it how we want. So we do give we give the system a model, and it gets as close as possible to this particular piece of geometry. Now, the higher poly that geometry is, the more expensive, the more difficult that check is to make. But absolutely, we've done this kind of stuff internally.
We've even messed with, magnetic boots.
Grab boots, yep.
So, yeah.
So, and I think we actually took them out of the build for a little while, just because the animations look so weird on them. But
that's
we'll
a
be putting
thing.
those right back in. So not only will you have the localized physics grid of, say, just like he's talking about, like a circular space station or something like this, but you'll also be able to magnetically connect yourself via your mag boots or whatever.
Which is probably super helpful
pretty much
on
any
the
area.
outside of the ship, right?
Yeah,
to get
absolutely.
around, especially for the bigger ships.
Sure, totally. And it's also kind of fun. I mean, it's a neat
super
thing to
fun.
mess around with, just like he says. You know, somebody's just going about their day-to-day business and they're hanging upside down from you or something like this. But yeah, that technology lets us do all this kind of work. And then speaking of circular gravities, are planets going to be basically enormous localized physics grids, or is there something more to them? There's a lot more to the planets. One of the tricky parts, again, and I think I talked about this in another 10 for the developers, is that we can't possibly store every single piece of physics collision on the server all the time, right? So this is something that we've got to generate on the client side at runtime somehow. So they're not big physics grids, essentially. They've got to have. They have their own gravity. It's completely implemented independently of a physics grid. Uses the same concept, I suppose, but it's not a physics grid entirely. It would be far too large. It's not even close to as granular as what we would
It's
need.
different than when you enter a ship, for example, right? Where you set up your boxes
Exactly,
and
it's
everything.
very, very different. And again, like if you think about it, right, you've got a very different shape. You've got a sphere, and everything's got to be a local gravity
to the center.
That's to the center of the sphere. Whereas in a local physics grid, it's kind
a
of
box,
defined.
right? And
It's
you
either
have
a
it-
box, or you can even
this
do
is
a
the gravity,
circle,
this is the
right,
ground.
and then everything is just going that direction. But it's a little bit more difficult to do on a planetary scale. But it's not a big physics grid. It's a lot. And not to be condescending at all. It's a lot more complicated, unfortunately, than that. I wish it was easy as enough as just making a big physics grid. But that wouldn't really work for what we need.
Definitely not. All right. What sort of navigation can we expect for planets, maps, GPS, beacons? And that's asked by Armored Citizen.
Those are cool names.
I'd imagine probably all of the above, right?
Yeah, we're gonna need all the above. And I consider sort of maps and GPS kind of the same sort of thing. GPS is just a function within a map, right? So it's just telling you where you are within these maps. Beacons, absolutely. So you guys get an idea, we're working on all the gameplay related to this. So the first step of that gameplay, and it's something that I showed in the Procedural Planet Tech demo, is the approach. I mean, if landing is going to take you 30, 35 minutes, because, I mean, we looked up how long an actual transition between, for Earth landings, right? How long atmosphere to ground really takes, and it takes a long time. If we make it take that exact same amount of time,
Oh.
you're going to land one time and you'll never do it
You're
again.
gonna be over it.
There'll be you're going to need half an hour of gameplay just to get down to the planet's surface. So that doesn't really work out. So one of the things that we're working on is the quantum travel beacons, where you end up close to the planet enough that you can land within a reasonable amount of time. How many beacons we put on, whether that's automatic, whether you manually do this all yourself. Since it's all completely seamless, of course we want it to be manual, but we also don't want it to take so long to do that you'll never want to do it.
That becomes a hindrance to your gameplay, right?
Exactly. So then once you get on the planet, right, we need some level of
where are you?
Global map.
Isn't that the hardest thing? Is it's huge, and even when you're working on it, you get lost sometimes.
Yeah, and I put my own beacons
right
in there sometimes. I'm just
so you
putting
can
little
navigate
tag points.
around. Yeah.
Right. So we're going to need all these, and we've talked a lot about this. And really, what it's going to come down to is really our first gameplay implementation of all of it. Which is happening as we speak. So this is something that we're working on internally. I don't know when you're going to see it, but we're basically solving all these problems right now. Like as simple as, okay, you're in 0G with your ship. You've transitioned now into gravity, where the planets have local gravity now, and you've got physics and everything. So how does the ship flight change? How does it feel, right? Is it fun? That's really what matters. So once we get there, then we'll be giving you your maps, GPSs, beacons all over the planet, things like this. So I expect that you'll have that.
And your map changes too, because you go from space, which is there is no ground, to
and it's all 3D. It's like a 3D map to needing
a planet,
some sort of 2D
and now you do have a horizon to
where I am. Yeah, exactly. So
cool. All right, next question. Which upcoming feature gives you the biggest headache so far? Which will probably be the hardest nut to crack?
It's going to be item
except the new item system.
Are you serious?
Except
the
new item
system.
system.
The guy knew. He's like, they're going to answer item port system.
Of course, it's the new item system. I mean, it's...
So I wonder, is the guy's name Drew or Drug or Druga?
Druga?
Drew?
Druff?
Druff. I don't know.
I could barely read.
Awful. Okay, so which features beyond item port? Because the item port one is really tricky, and I'm trying to answer with the item port.
Well,
right?
I'm just going to go ahead and do it. It's the item port system, and we can go into other
goes
things
except the
it,
new item
but I'm going to
system.
talk about it anyways because it is the biggest headache so far because we're working on it all the time, and you're working on it constantly. So the biggest thing that we're dealing with right now is all the characters, for example, are going through a major transitional phase. They're going from what Crytek used as CDFs, which is a type of XML where you tie all your items together, into a sophisticated item port system. And you've currently been working with the engineers on building this tool, and so now we're going to be able to build characters as items with this new item port system, which is super helpful, but at the same time it's difficult because you're trying to support everything that previously existed because you don't want to break everything for design and cinematics, but yet you want to push forward and use the new tech. So like it's kind of difficult to support both, but you do have to make the transition, right?
It's one of those infamous problems where you've done everything right when you have exactly what you started with. Which seems to make no sense. So like visually, right? And Forrest hits the nail right on the head with this one. Again, the CDF setup was great for Crytek. It's really hard to maintain, hundreds of characters with that sort of system. The other thing that didn't work for us on a coding side, on a programming side, is that the every independent piece of the character actually needs some sort of component code to go with it.
And it needs persistence, right?
And it needs persistence, exactly. So because of the new item layout, we can actually have different code running on different functions running on different pieces of the character itself. Rather than you being one character as a whole, you're actually a collection of a lot of different gameplay components that are being updated differently than other things. So we kind of didn't really answer his question except the new item system. So
and
beyond the new item system, what else kind of hurts us? Like the character one is hard though. I would honestly say just the full scale because we're doing the full scale solar systems now. And that's something that I really think is going to end up out to the community sooner rather than later, is the full-size solar system itself. I think that's going to be the hardest nut to crack. We've already got all the support in it, but it's all the extraneous stuff that we haven't thought of yet, or we haven't even seen. So we've got QA starting to run it through these full-scale tests. And then not only will we have full scale, but likely at somewhat, I don't know if it's going to be the same time, but I'd like to see this happen kind of all together, is we put one of the procedural planets within there. Now, I call it procedural. It's going to be like the designer control planet. So we put one of the planets in to the full solar scale, as the full solar system scale, call it whatever. And then we see all the problems that brings. Yeah. Right? And we've got to start
we're combining
fixing these
full systems or full solar systems with procedural planets.
Exactly.
With the player customization and the back end, right? The persistence. So your character is your character, you know, going forward. And all these things come together once, which are all 100% necessary for this project.
But how awesome will that be? Because
but how great is it going to be? Because that's really we've done so much of the you know, of the development for art and the content. And
and we're always
figuring
doing
all this stuff
a
out.
Smaller scale version, right? Smaller scale version.
And this is what brings it together, right? It takes all these things we're working on the last couple of years and finally puts those final pieces together. So it's super excited. But we, like anything, we know it's not going to be easy. It will be a headache and it will be difficult. But we will achieve it, and it will be conquered, and it will be awesome. But you know,
it's going to be.
There'll be problems.
But you guys have seen this sooner rather than later.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
Because we're doing the testing.
Yeah, we're doing the testing now. Awesome. Any chance you could? How did they know about the new item system? I want to ask. I'm going to ask you personally.
I bet you Chris talks about it all the time.
Do you think this is one of our internal employees asked this question just to mess with us?
Oh, you think so?
Maybe. I would think so.
Probably.
Here's another internal question. Potentially. No, I'm just joking. This one was by Solias. Solias. Any chance you can give an update on the female model?
No.
What has caused them to be held up for so long after the male model was released? What are the current issues that stop the models from being available in the verse?
So I can blame all kinds of departments if you want. I mean, Steve will be super happy. So Steve Bender right now is in Frankfurt. You know, my partner in crime there. We all have an office that it's all sort of shared. So I'm going to blame Steve on this one. I'm going to say that animation is behind. No. And that's not really the problem. Actually, we've had
there's a lot of hurdles.
A couple different things on the mesh, which I'll let Forrest answer. But on the animation technology sort of side, what we really want is a completely finished male. And that doesn't mean mesh, that doesn't mean necessarily like outfits and things like this. What it means is everything to do with animation. So we've got most of it, right? We've got lots of first-person stuff, holding weapons. We've got cover. We've finally now got mantling and vaulting. So basically one's mantling, vaulting, cover, locomotion, ships. What else am I missing? I'm missing something. And AI sort of interactions anyways. Once those are all done for the male, then we can basically just plug a female into it. There's a technical implementation side of this where we actually have to plug a whole bunch of stuff within Mannequin. If any of the asset names are different between a male and a female, and sometimes we've done this, that's going to cause a problem within Mannequin. But we actually want to use the exact same logic that a male does to the female, because we don't want to be fixing two different bugs, first of all.
And here's the thing, right? Exactly. We don't want to make the same mistake twice, and we don't want to make the same mistake in parallel with each other.
And that's it,
So the one thing that we are doing is we are figuring out every single thing that goes right and goes wrong and figuring out our complete process.
Yes.
And then taking the female character and having a much smoother transition and making sure that everything works properly with everything we've learned from the male character.
And then that way a female implementation is easy. It doesn't take us nearly as much time because a lot of it is, how do we do the male? Okay, let's do it the same. How do we do the male? Okay, let's do it the same. So that's what's going to solve all our problems for that. The other thing that this gives us a huge benefit for is the Vanduul. It's going to be the exact same process. So once that male is completely locked down for the Squadron 42 aspect of it, vaulting, mantling, all the animation, then females, it's not done, but we've got all the assets. It's just a matter of plugging it in.
Yeah, and we're still doing some polish to the actual female. Herself, the body, that's, we want to make sure that
Should
that
we talk
is
about
correct.
the 4K nether region texture map? Not really?
Oh, never outsource.
So that was an interesting
Never
thing.
outsource characters.
Yeah, if you outsource characters, just be prepared to get stuff back.
You never know what you're going to get.
They don't want me to talk about it. But a 4K nether region, I think you can figure out what that means. 4K texture for that. I just don't get it.
And then there's the obviously you know the rigs and everything that you got to solve. So
Yes.
But the female model is coming along, and I'm personally very excited to have it because we've already had some clothing made for it, and we want to get that. And I think that's gonna kind of fall into the customization too. We had to figure out how the players are going to be able to customize themselves with all their items and stuff. And the male had a series of clothes already, so we were able to tackle that challenge and figure it out, and now we can move on to the female. So I'm super excited. That is coming very soon.
Right, and just to give you a full sort of look on this, the females, we've already got them locomoting around. We've got a bunch within Squadron 42 that are specific to Squadron 42, so they all work. It's just a matter of you not having seen them within the persistent universe yet, because when we give them to you, we want to have the customization, like you said. We want to have all the same outfits as the male. We basically don't want to take anything away from the female.
Yeah,
right?
and then there's the whole, we have all our heads, right? So we've been solving, you have your body, but then you have these head scans. How do the head scans fit on the body? You have to match up the topology, the skin
match
tones,
up the skin tone,
which is which is a challenge. So there's just a lot of things, and we're trying to do it one step at a time and make sure that we don't make the same mistake twice. And
sure, and
be as efficient as possible.
Yeah,
right?
when they come online, they'll be fully featured, so we won't just kind of build them up slowly. It'll just be all at once.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Will there be barber shops in game or places to alter our character's appearance for aesthetic purposes, or in an expanded capacity, a not so legal purpose? That sounds shady.
Yeah,
is that
not so legal purpose. So is that like
change your appearance so you can get away with a crime?
Yeah, right. Or is that like I don't know.
I think that there will be. We've been working a lot on hair, recently. That's been a big topic, because no matter how great your head scans look, you still need hair, right?
And that's our biggest problem, right? The current hair that we had worked on, and even some of the tech we're fighting with a bit, is that's what's bringing not down, but lowering the quality. Yeah, I mean bringing down the heads a little bit, right? You take a look at the head, you take a look at the face texture. We've got the crazy wrinkles, we've got pore mapping, we've got all this crazy stuff. And then you've kind of got
hair, which has some alpha test on it with maybe some directional maps that just can't. There's a lot of elements still missing, right? Get that nice little rim lighting.
Right.
I'm sure we've all seen the Paragon demo where they have all the hair strands.
Well, they got this awesome spline stuff that looks just amazing. I love the look of that stuff.
And it's one of those things that you always want, all this tech, but you still have to commit to where you're at and work with the tools that you have, right? Sure. And then to get it done, and then further down the roadmap, you can always try to stay on top of what everybody else is doing, and keep to the same technical standards that the rest of the game.
The same visual standards, really, right? Like, we've got to be up, and we've got to be one of the best games out there, and we don't want to give you any old technology, is kind of the thing, and we don't want to make the faces that we spent so long on, right? Look worse. So the actual question is are there going to be barber shops? That's a design question. I have no idea about barber shops. What I do know is that you'll be modifying your face in a medical facility of some sort, right?
Yeah, like reconstructive surgery.
Exactly. So whether you're doing your hair at the same time, that's a great question. Probably.
I would say so.
I would guess.
I would imagine anything like that has to do with the head in general.
With your face, so facial hair or whatever else. So I guess you have to get plastic surgery to shave.
Maybe.
Fair enough. I mean. Yeah,
we are in LA.
Yeah, that's kind of pretty normal. But there's a lot of problems to solve with the hair, like Forrest was saying. Even down to just having different head sizes. I mean, all the heads are a different size. So how do you stop yourself from making every single haircut for every single head?
So if I have one haircut made for one head, but obviously when you are customizing your character, you're going to want to have access to all the different hair.
Yep.
But what if you chose NPC shaped head 9 as opposed to NPC head 55?
Exactly.
Or even if you've controlled it through a modifier or something, or a blend shape, whatever we end up doing.
Right.
How do you make sure that the hair stays attached to the head when the head changes size?
That's the thing. And those are problems that we're solving. And to give you an idea of that particular one, how we want to do this is that we have an actual scout map. We hold all the morph targets for every single head within the scout map, or we keep offsets of every single joint that we need to offset when we're customizing the face, so that we actually only make one model that contains all the morph targets for every single head. And then the hair cards on top of that, those are going to have to move around.
And we've kind of started playing around with it, right? Like we realized very early, eyelashes, for example, right?
Oh,
You
that's
make
a good one.
eyelashes, and you're like, wait a minute, everyone has a slightly different size socket for, in the head, right? So how do you make, you can't just make, we have 120 heads, you can't just make one set of eyelashes to fit all the eye shapes, right? So all of a sudden you got to figure out, that's where our technical animators come in.
Yeah, and the technical art team, we've got a really awesome technical art team, and one of the things that our team is the best at, and I say this, and I'm super proud of the guys for being able to always do this, is these massive script updates that will affect all the assets together. So one of the hardest things about this game is the sheer scope of it, right? Like how many heads we've got. We got over 100 heads. How many character bodies we got? We've got over, hundreds of these. You can't go in, manually open up Maya, tweak one, close it, save.
There's too much.
Manually open up Maya, close it, save. It would take you all year. But we've got guys like Mark McCall, John Riggs, Gage, Matt Atreri, writing these scripts that are a batch process to it. So to give you an example, Mark McCall made the eyelashes, right? So one thing, we don't get delivered eyelashes with the faces. It's a problem because they look pretty funny without eyelashes, especially the females, right? So what he's done is he has actually got a script that builds the eyelash geometry. Not only does it build the eyelash geometry, but it checks the head that it's working on, builds the geometry, skins it on, exports the process, puts it into a CDF, and it's done.
Because that's
it's
how you
really
manage
like
it,
a
right?
one-click
Because
thing.
you want to have your artists spend the time on an eyelashes, because if you could have them spend time on one eyelash, they're going to look really good. If they have to spend their time on 120 eyelashes, you're going to have a very low quality set of eyelashes.
And you're going to have an artist that's going to want to.
And we have this visual bar, so totally. So you want to have artists concentrate on single elements, and then you have your technical artists populate those single elements in a very smart approach to save the labor time, so we could concentrate on the visual fidelity and not the art labor,
not the actual labor of
itself, right?
Sure. But this is where bugs come from. So to give you guys an idea, asset bugs, this is usually what happens. So like you'll do a batch process like this. You'll check, you have to spot check a whole bunch of them. You'll maybe have QA check every single one of them. But you'll spot check a couple, and then there'll be one that didn't work correctly. Or one that, somebody's PC lagged out for half a second or whatever. I mean, this is where the asset bugs come from. It's not like somebody was sitting there, they looked at it, it's, whatever, the faces exploded, and they're like, yeah, that's good, and exported it. It's usually something that somebody hasn't actually physically touched.
Yeah, totally. Cool. All right, cool.
We
got one more question by Fallon. Just curious about how procedural generation, more procedural planet questions, and I love that, will work on planets with large bodies of waters, oceans, and how will that affect performance? Is it hard to render so much water or easier on the side of the player? Also, space whales, excellent question. I don't know about the space whales, but I do know, working with oceans in the past, it is shader driven. So I think that it is achievable without killing performance. To have water
absolutely.
planets.
And again, the Carson Wenzel is one of the. He's unsung. He's very quiet, unless he's very angry. But he's written white papers for the engine. He was there from the get-go, and he's actually working within this. He's actually training one of our junior graphics programmers to do this particular implementation. So him and a gentleman by the name of Tiago, who went to ID Software, I believe, and worked on Doom. Worked on our oceans originally within the CryEngine.
Right.
And I think I can go out on a limb and say the oceans within the CryEngine were one of the biggest, the best features within the engine. It looked incredible. The best. We had scattering through the waves, all this crazy stuff that eventually,
when you go underwater, the volumetrics, it's
exactly.
Just gorgeous.
So I think you can expect at least that level of fidelity. But what's tricky again about water is how, first of all, the highlight changes at a distance. So when you're approaching a planet, the water's got to highlight. It's got to react very different, specularity-wise, to the actual surface of it.
The Fresnel is just
exactly. Then when you get up close, right, you want to see waves, but you don't want to see it tiling everywhere, right? So we've got this real big scale problem that we're going to have to deal with, dynamic tessellation on the stuff. Being able to have displaced waves and things like this. And then additionally, if we want to go under the water, which a ship to design should be able to do, right? Let's hope that design says that ships are submarines also.
Oh no!
Right? To me, if a ship can go into outer space, it can go under freaking water, right? I think it should be able to go underwater, but whatever. I mean, we'll see where that goes with the design. That's a design thing. But I think that should happen.
I'm gonna get back to my desk.
And if you go underwater, space whales indeed.
I'm gonna have a task when I get back to my desk to make sure that the jetpack supports underwater as well.
Oh, that's a good point, right? And then, oh wow, because I mean, what a Pandora's box, right? Because you get under, and it's like you open the back of the Cutlass. What happens, right? Shouldn't the water flow in, right? But is the local physics grid like pushing water out? I don't know. There's all sorts of crazy.
A submarine, though, is built to withstand the extreme weight and pressure that the water puts on, and I don't think that a ship needs to withstand the same amount of pressure in outer space. So.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Wouldn't you think that a missile hitting the side of your ship has a lot of pressure?
I feel like a missile hitting the side of your ship blows it up.
Right, I don't know.
So,
Anyways.
I don't know, I'm just saying.
So whether or not you go underwater, I don't know.
When J.J. Abrams did it to the Enterprise, I think it was kind of dumb.
What, put it underwater?
Yeah.
Oh, I think that was fine. It's got shields.
Are you talking about Voyager Home?
No, the one where...
Isn't Voyager Home? It's underwater?
No.
No? It's
But
just
that shot. That shot when he's coming out of the water.
The new Star Trek,
Yeah.
what J.J. Abrams did with the Enterprise hiding underwater.
Yeah, and then it comes out of it and it's...
Yeah, it was cool, but it didn't make any
Dude.
sense.
But it didn't make any sense. Fair enough.
All right.
Sorry.
So can ships go underwater if the Enterprise can do it? No, sure.
Yeah, right. And again, this will be a design debate, and as you see, there's a couple different mindsets. I'm sure all the players are going to go, yeah, absolutely, they need to go underwater, right? Because
then other people will be like, no, finish the game.
Nah, we can do like Hunt for Red October things. One ping only.
I'm more interested in the space whales personally.
Yeah, and the space whales, right? We talked a little bit earlier in a different question about fauna. Anyways, so space whales, megafauna. I think we're gonna have to support something like this, right? Whether it's whales or big things on the ground, walking around. Yeah, sure, space whales. Let's do it. You heard it here. So that pretty much like pushes Chris.
Do you want to hear
right?
my space whale joke?
Yeah, I do.
So a space whale walks into a bar, and he sits down next to another space whale.
Yeah.
And the space whale goes,
Okay.
And then the space whale looks over and goes, man, you are wasted.
You're wasted.
All right, thank you for
Awesome.
coming to another episode of 10 for the Developers. Sean Tracy, Forrest Steffen. We'd like to thank the subscribers over and over and over again because we love you, and again, without you, we would not be here. So thank you so much for everything and your contributions, and we're gonna get back to work and keep making this game for you.
Hell yeah, we'll get the females done right now. Let's go do it.
And the space whales. Thank you
And
so
space
much.
whales. All right.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Hey guys, thanks for watching 10 for the Chairman. If you guys would like to see more episodes, go here. If you guys would like to subscribe to our YouTube channel and always keep up to date with all our video content, go here. And if you guys would like to watch episodes of Around the Verse, go here please. And I will see you in the verse.